I did not tell my parents about my company. They fully had no idea until after I raised my seed round from BCB. And I was in the car with my dad who picked me up from the airport. And I was like, Dad, I have to tell you something. I'm quitting my job next Tuesday. I'm like putting my 2 weeks notice. And he said, okay. And I said, to start a company. And he said, okay. And I said, in India. And then he almost veered off the road. Like,
Often in our business, we talk about shipping velocity, doing things, hustle, run fast. I think you have given a great framework around it, that those actions beget information that you can use to further improve the next action.
if you're waiting for the right time to start the company, there'll never be a right time. There's always something that's going to come up, and there's always be some amount of fear. And so you just have to rip the Band-Aid off and do it.
Welcome to Unstarted. What is unique about this show is this is about you. It is for founders, by founders. I'm very excited today to welcome a young founder to the show whose services that she brings through a company called Pronto. I hope and I think many of you would have already used. Very interesting background and story, very unusual background and story, a story that I was inspired by when I first met her. Anjali Sardana, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So Anjali, how many years, we already did this earlier, how many years in India and before you started this company?
0 years.
Amazing.
I'm fresh off the boat.
Fresh off the boat, the other way around.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go back. Tell us a little bit about your background growing up. I know you did something different in your undergrad as well, and how that led to this idea.
Yeah, so I am from Northern Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C., and I went to Georgetown for undergrad and majored in biology. So very, very different from
Why
business.
biology?
So in the US, what you major in college and what you do after college are completely unrelated. And when I was in college, I became very obsessed with evolution, or the idea that the exact permutation and combination of every living organism, right? The exact order and combination of alleles, which are form factors of genes in their body, have resulted in the exact diversity of life that exists.
How does that connect to then wanting to be an entrepreneur? Was that something that was always in your blood?
Yeah, both my mom and dad are entrepreneurs, so I always knew I was going to start a company. Also, I'm terrible at listening to other people, so having a job was always going to be very difficult.
Have your investors realized that yet?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. Congratulations on your latest round, by the way.
Thank
well
you.
done.
Thank you.
So this 6 factors that you mentioned, did that in any way influence what you wanted to do?
So I really love building an operations business. Effectively, what an operations business is a system of people, right? Like you have this large number of people who are fulfilling different roles, and I think of them a lot like the behavior that is the output of this system of people, right? The net result of the business is very similar when you think about evolution. So essentially you have a very complex system where you can derive the inputs down to a small number of factors. And so if you want to affect change in the output, you have to just figure out which of the few input drivers you have to tweak and in what manner.
Wow. So most people hate operationally complex businesses. You like operationally complex businesses because you have a framework around how to make it work.
Yes. I think before I started a company, this is when I was a senior in college, I thought about what type of company I wanted to start. And there were 2 options in my head, like a product first company where, the company lives or dies by the product quality, and then there's, operations businesses. And I don't consider distribution-led businesses as real companies. They're not very durable in the long run, right? And so if I was going to build a company, I am not technical, and therefore building a product first company was never going to make sense because I, as the founder, would not have been critical for the success of the company. But an operations business is where I can actually be critical and I can be the linchpin.
Very interesting. So you're saying potentially 3 different pillars to building a company: product, operations, and distribution. You don't think distribution is durable. We can debate that, but you don't think so. Product is not your skill set, therefore operations. I think that's a very good takeaway for people to think through as they think about it themselves. What brought you to India, and then the nature of the business that you're doing? Why not do this in the US?
This is not a real company in the US. I mean, this as a problem statement.
Can we? So I think people would know of the company, but why don't you describe what you're doing?
So we are building the world's largest labor organization platform, starting with home services in India. And the idea is, you have end customers, whether that's B2B or B2C, though right now our core category is B2C, and they have certain expectations for the services that they receive, right? They're also the same users of quick commerce, right? So, everything delivered in 8 minutes, everything must be perfect, everything must be, I'm a very busy corporate person, everything must be on time. And on their own, service providers in especially unskilled and low-skilled labor markets cannot provide, the services to the expectation of the end customers, right? And so, house help in the offline world are unreliable, you have hit or miss, on quality, and there's obviously safety risks, right? And so there's room to essentially build a platform which structures this unskilled labor and provides the incentives for workers to stay in the structure.
And
so you're
that's
benefiting
a much
them.
deeper market in India than in the US.
Yes, I mean, in the US, first of all, people don't get their home cleaned every day, right? It's a super luxury service. Demand density doesn't exist the same way, right? So, by the way, quick commerce in our business, the 10-minute is an emergent feature of the model rather than something that has to be is a marketing gimmick.
So, coming back, moving to India, having grown up in the US, spent 0 days, I got the operating architecture. There must be, and there are people probably watching you who, first of all, what was the connect back to India for you growing up? And they're probably people watching you inspired by you saying, but can I succeed in India? How did you think about that?
I think if you think you cannot do something, then you can't do it. If you think you can do something, then you still might not be able to do it, but you have a non-zero chance of being able to do it. And so I did not tell my parents about my company until
I was just going to say when you said that, I'm like, your parents might have a different view of that.
No, they fully had no idea until after I raised my seed round from BCB. I know they didn't know because I flew home I was living in Boston at the time, working at Bain Capital, and I flew home, and I was in the car with my dad who picked me up from the airport, and I was like, Dad, I have to tell you something. And he said, no, okay, what is it? And I was like, I'm quitting my job next Tuesday. I'm like putting in my 2 weeks notice. And he said, okay. And I said, to start a company. And he said, okay. And I said, in India. And then he almost veered off the road. So they had no idea. And the reason I hadn't told them is back in April 2024 when I was in college and I told my dad about this company idea. He told me, first of all, that's stupid, no one's going to use that. And second of all, you're not capable of building that. So I was like, okay, I took that as a challenge. I was like, I'm going to build it and I won't take any help and I won't tell them. And so I think if I had a lot of doubt in my mind, whether am I the right person to start this company or will I be able to do it, I wouldn't have been able to do it. And I would have psyched myself out. I think you have to have a almost blind courage, as a very early stage founder, almost like a fake it till you make it sort of thing, where you convince yourself that you are the alpha, you are the man, and you can do it, and nothing can stop you. And if you let doubt creep into your mind, then you won't be able to start.
I mean, that's a great framework, but what in your life experience got you to that conviction?
Conviction that I would be the right person to do it.
People said you can't do it in India, you can't do it, but you said I had that blind courage. How did you get that?
A bit of it was faking it till I make it. I didn't have the courage, but I just told myself I did. If you ask my analyst classmates at Bain Capital, I raised my first round while I was still there, and we talked about this recently. They're like, yeah, you were definitely faking it till you made it. At that time, you were scared, but you didn't show it, and that was the way I made it through. But the other part of it was, I think some experiences during college where I kept pushing myself, and I realized that things that I thought I wasn't able to do, once I pushed myself, I realized I was capable of much more. So I love hiking, and I will intentionally go on very hard hikes completely unprepared. So I studied abroad in college, and I did a couple hikes in Europe where I was very, very underprepared. And just to see if I could do it, which is dangerous. I don't recommend it. But
no, but there's an instructive lesson.
Yes.
So you kept pushing yourself, and then you realized that the bar would just keep rising for yourself. Right?
See, I think most limitations are just like false. Like they're in people's minds. People are capable of much more than they think they are. You just have to push yourself. And
now I see the connection from between the biology and the entrepreneurship also playing out. How did you choose this business?
Yeah. So the thesis I came to before starting the company was around labor organization in India. And the idea that India is a place where labor markets are very inefficient, right? Both for the end providers of the service, so your house help or your laborers in construction, right? And they're faced with a lot of underemployment, income instability, lack of safety, dignity, respect in the workplace. And then for your customers, there's also a lot of things broken, right? And the idea was the more low-skilled or unskilled you get in the labor market, the wider the gap is between what end customers expect and what service providers can do on their own. And therefore, you can come in, build a platform which structures this labor, and then build essentially a win-win-win business. Everyone can benefit. You give income stability and safety and respect and full employment to the workers, and then you provide services that meets people's expectations for the customers. And then it was an idea of like, okay, how do I pick the first category we go after? And there were a couple things here. One was that I wanted this category to exist, like for myself. So I think that the idea was like, okay, it could have been any segment of labor, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's B2B or B2C. And then coming to this being the first category, it was a lot of, first of all, I just wanted it to exist. Second of all, it was absolutely the right time for this to start existing. And the third was I wanted to start something that was B2C and not B2B. Reason being, I think this is a really hard thing to build in the as a scalable platform. And there's no barriers to entry in B2C versus there's very high barriers to entry in B2B.
Yeah.
And I'm not credible enough to start a B2B business.
Yeah. So, we tell people lived experience, experiential problem. You're coming from the US, you have some great frameworks and theory on what to do. Did you have lived experience in India? I know not having lived in India, but had you experienced the problem? How did you diligence the idea? Many people here would say, wait a minute, this is exactly the opposite of what we have been discussing here many times, and that may well be the answer.
I think the validation came from just trying it, right? So
after moving back.
So it was like a semi-transitional period before. Like I'd say I officially moved March 5th, 2025, which was like about 2 weeks after we raised our first round. But there was a period of essentially 6 months before that, which was a transitional period, and that was when we ran our pilots. And so it first started with we just and this is the royal we, we printed flyers. We had a WhatsApp number, and we had one professional, and we got no bookings.
No, so this was a what we? It is you plus one.
No, royal we just means it's myself.
It's you. Okay.
There was,
so you were doing everything yourself.
Well, so me and then there was this guy Aman, who was on our operations team, who was he's the local Delhi kid, right?
Yeah.
So what we did is we had his WhatsApp number, and then we had one professional. And then we got no bookings, and I realized okay, why? And so we have absolutely no value proposition, right? And that's when it sparked, okay, really think deeply about what the customer cares about, right? Which is quality, safety, reliability. And I was okay, we provide none of those things. And so then it came to okay, how can I test this further, right? And so then end of October 2024, I vibe coded the first version of our app before vibe coding was a thing, and published that on the App Store, and then we started to get a lot of bookings. And then we had no professionals. And then I realized, okay, you have to actually provide a value proposition for the supply as well. And then I had to figure out, okay, what do they care about very deeply, which is income stability, underemployment, and dignity, safety, respect. Then it was solving for those things. And we operated in Delhi we launched our first pilot December 3rd, I think, 2024. And we ran in Delhi for about a month. And really it was 1 week, it was 5 days where we actually operated, and it was chaos, absolute chaos. Reason being, Delhi is much further, much more spread out, right?
Yeah.
There's a height restriction on buildings, so you don't have as many really tall societies. Second is that people actually have a relationship with their house help in Delhi versus in Gurgaon, it's less so, and therefore it's a little bit harder for a market to crack. You have to be more mature as a product. Versus in Gurgaon, people are so desperate that they're willing to try anything.
But so many instructive lessons, learning by doing, hacking your way through, you were doing a bunch of this yourself. If you had to do it again, people watching you would say, wait a minute, even I can do this. I can throw myself into a problem. I will also not potentially have all the answers. I'll figure my answers out on the go. To those people, anything you would have done differently?
Anything I would have done differently? I would have tried more things faster. Like I probably wasted a couple months, like September, like August to September / October 2024. I probably could have compressed those 3 months into 1 month if I had just moved faster and tried more things. And I think the thing is, like, you don't learn anything by reading books,
theory.
by the theory. Like in starting a company, there's no such thing as theory, right? Like I had a friend also at Bain Capital who he also wanted to start a company, and he spent I think 6 months doing expert calls, and he learned absolutely nothing from that experience. And also the product that he came to the conclusion was needed from the 6 months of expert calls is not what he's doing today.
Absolutely,
right?
and
So,
I couldn't agree more.
yeah.
Forget the experts, with all due respect. Customers are your experts, and you were immersing yourself with the customers. Let's take the first question because it goes to as you were starting out.
Do you really need to have an original idea to be able to build a company?
So, I know you disagree, but per my count, you were a second or a third or mover in the market. So it doesn't sound like an original idea. But I can also see when you talk about your vision and your mission, maybe it is. How do you see it? Do you need an original idea to start a company?
Definitely not. I mean, a couple of things here. One is that like Facebook wasn't original, Google wasn't original, Amazon wasn't original. None of these companies were original. So
people may not know that. Facebook was not the first social network. Google was not the first.
NVIDIA was not the first chip company, right? Like none of these companies were original, right? It's all about execution, doing it better, doing it faster, and the long-term vision of the company. I don't think that most of the companies that like were competing with Amazon had the same long-term vision as Jeff Bezos, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's just about execution. I'll also say like we are building a company that doesn't exist, right? Like we're building a company that doesn't have a parallel, right?
Why do you say that? Your urban company is doing something similar, unnamed competition is doing something similar, third unnamed competition is doing something similar.
So I think those are people who in our current core category we compete with, but the long-term vision of the company is very different, right? And I'm not here to build like home services 2.0. Frankly, that's like a very small TAM, right? I'm here to build $1 trillion company, not like a $1.8 billion company after 11 years. Like that's like not a good use of time. That's not even a venture. That's not a good use of a venture dollar, right? So like the long-term vision of the company is very, very different from anything that has ever existed before. But in the core category, we're not a third mover. We're like a 200th mover, right? I mean, there is like innumerable amount of people who tried to start this before, and it just goes back to all that matters is execution.
So interesting. You are saying that people have been doing this for a long time. So nothing has scaled, nothing has become a $1 trillion company. So what makes you think you can change or bend the curve?
Why not?
Probably because there are some, I like that, but probably because there are some structural reasons why the labor market, the way you articulated, could never get organized, could never bridge the gap between what the supply wants and what the demand wants. Has something changed specifically as it comes to India that you think it's possible now?
Yes. I think that when I say we're going to be $1 trillion company, I will first say that like I don't think that'll only be in India ever, right? Like I do think that the future of the company is very global, and India for global is the thesis. The second part of it is that like I think if you looked at our current business today, right? If you tried to start it 10 years ago, which many people did, it would never have worked, right? So structurally, many things have changed. One is that data is cheap, right? You have people are actually online, no matter what part of the economic spectrum they're on, right? You have Aadhaar, you have UPI, all these things which make the business possible. And
because especially in your business, I guess smaller transaction sizes, the payment, if there was payment friction, it would just be.
Yeah, I mean, the
work.
vast majority of our payments on our platform are UPI,
Exactly.
right? Like our verification processes and background check processes are done through Aadhaar, right? We would never have been able to start this business if we didn't have if every single one of our professionals didn't have copious amounts of data availability.
And they are all now very digitally savvy,
Yes.
even on the supply side. That's very key. You can
Well,
actually
yes
include
and
that.
no. I actually disagree with this.
Really?
I think we have to teach them how to use their phone.
Really?
Yes. Like they actually like so there's a reason why if you look at
Do they have phones?
yes, they all have phones.
Do they all have smartphones or feature phones?
Smartphones.
Okay.
So that is there. I think they all have just a few apps on their phone, right? WhatsApp. But then if you look at like how well they even know how to use WhatsApp, it's like there's a lot of features that they don't understand. It's the reason why if you like voice notes are so prevalent, right?
Yeah.
Because like literacy is a challenge in this market, and that actually constrains their ability to use their phone. And so if you look at the pattern of how they use apps on their phone, they actually
Yeah.
just memorize where things are located on an app. So like most people, like most Blinkit delivery riders are not actually reading the instructions on the app. They just know, okay, this green thing is here. I slide it here, which means that whenever you are giving them new technology or a new feature or something changes in the app, we have to do a lot of training around like how do you use this,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of just like pictorial infographics, everywhere that are just like, okay, you press this. Because literacy is the ultimate challenge to tech literacy.
Yeah, but you are helping them with that. What else? What are the other shocks to the system? And let's take a question while we are doing this. How do you build a culture in a company that has to do this really well? And I know you lead by example a lot, but let's ask the question as well.
Hey, I am Hanan, the co-founder of Play to Speak. This is my second year running business and my first time hiring a bunch of employees. What I really wanted to know is the kind of work culture and expectations I need to set and I need to expect from them. So if you can give me your top 3 in terms of work culture that would make them both efficient, productive and motivated at the same time.
So, and give us the war stories. Give us
Yeah.
how you have done a lot of it yourself.
Well, first I'll caveat this because obviously we got a question from someone who's been a founder for 2 years and I've been a founder for 1 year, so I'm probably less qualified to answer this than them. But
Maybe or may not be, because you are taking probably a much bigger leap on your background versus what you're doing. So I think it'll be very interesting.
yeah, so I think in the early days, there's a couple things here. You have to hire people who are mission driven, right? Like mission oriented above everything else. There is an operating partner at Gladebrook, Sharish, who gave me this advice very early on. Those around like mission versus missionary versus mercenary. And this is very true of our early team, right? Between even before we launched and then even like pre our Series A.
What is missionary versus mercenary?
Missionary is someone who's here to grow the company, right? Wants to see the company succeed. Is not self-optimizing, right? They're not looking for personal gain. They're looking just for like the team win. And mercenary is someone who's optimizing for themselves, right? And they're more likely to treat something as a job, right? As just a 9 to 5, because if they don't see the incremental value for themselves beyond a certain point, then they don't do any work beyond that, right? And they're not going to be high ownership. They're not going to be high agency. And in an early team, if your team is mercenaries, you are going to die, right? Like I would guarantee that, right? Because you need people who are going to be extremely high ownership, extremely high agency, because there's not enough hours in the day. And if you have to delegate everything and push people to do everything, then you won't survive, right? And so our early team before our Series A was me and 4 people, right? And our maximum age was 24 and minimum age was 20. So it was like we had like 5 people, including myself. I was 22. So everyone was just mission driven. And I think when I hired all these folks, some had signed on before the seed round where we had $0 raised, and a few signed on in the weeks afterwards. And at that time, we had 0 credibility. I went to a college where no one in India had ever even heard of. And
although it's one of the top US universities.
yes, but
you're
like
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
how many people in India know Georgetown? Like maybe I don't know, like 0.001% of people, right? So no one's heard of it. I didn't work at any company which people would have heard of. Though people do think Bain Capital and Bain are the same, but they aren't. So no pedigree and no IIT-IIM. And I also raised my seed round from a non-Indian investor who never made an India investment. So truly 0 credibility. And so the only reason that people signed on was because they believed in the mission and they believed in me and they wanted to be part of the journey, right? I was not offering high compensation. I wasn't offering, a resume booster. And I'm glad that I hired those folks when we were so early, and to this day, I don't hire people by I don't sell people to join Pronto based on, any
How
sort
much
of
money you have raised.
exactly how much money we've raised, or my background or lack thereof, or like who our investors are. It's just about the mission, because if you're hiring mercenaries, even to this day, if you're hiring mercenaries, I don't think you're going to go anywhere.
This is very good, very good. And people joined you because they believed in the mission.
Yes. And I think those people also are the people who are going to put up with how hard very
so
very
let's
early
talk
stage
about
is.
that. Talk about how hard building a business like this is, not because of your background, because of the nature of the business, some war stories, and how your team therefore learns the culture.
Yeah. So before our launch, which was April 2nd, 2025, we had to recruit our first set of professionals. And so I knew, okay, I'm not the person who's going to be able to recruit them. Like, who's going to listen to me, right?
I know you call them professionals, but I
Yes.
have to be clear with people. These are the maids who come home and the household help. Yeah.
Yes. So I was like, okay, this is not my strength. And we were in Gurgaon at the time. So I was like, okay, I need someone who's truly local, right? And so we hired someone. His name is Kapil. He's now our NCR supply manager, right? And so he's like very, very local. And I was like, okay, he'll be able to connect with folks better. And so we were in Sector 56, Gurgaon. And he went to Gata, which is in Sector 55, which is the slum area there. And he showed up and he's like trying to recruit folks. And then he got like almost beaten up. Like no one would talk to him. And this is like his first day on the job. So he's like, and we made him quit his other job with no notice. And so he's like, okay, what do I do? I can't let the team down. So he goes to a store. He buys this like white button-down shirt and a 120 rupee gold chain. And he goes and rents a car, and then he drives to S Block, which is near Nathapur in Gurgaon. And he goes and he like stands on top of the car and he says, like, listen up everyone, I'm hiring for a huge company. And the next day he showed up at the hub with 30 people.
Wow, what a story.
Yeah, and that's one of the wins. And we had a lot of hard ones. So we all also lived together in the Sector 56 hub. So in the hub there was like a cabin, and there was a couch where I would sit on.
This was amazing. I remember this. So your initial team actually cohabitated for a long period.
So it wasn't intentional. It was just that everyone lived a little far away, and also we were working nonstop.
Yeah.
And so no one had time to go home. And then I had a room which was like a 5-minute walk away, which I'd go to sometimes. But we were in the hub from like 5 a.m. to 2 a.m. basically every day. And so for some, God knows what reason, maybe you remember what my justification was back in the day. We used to operate 24/7, but we only had 5 people on the team, including myself. Right? And so we would take turns sleeping. So I would sleep from like 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. And then at night I would stay awake to see if there were any bookings. And when there were, we had like these security cameras installed in that cabin, but they also had a speaker. So if there was a booking, then I would just like open the speaker and then shout at them to wake up. So it was fun times. It was also very ironic because we were like a cleaning service, but that room was like disgusting. Like it was absolutely like filthy. Like
how would you describe the culture of, and it sounds early versus now, but I know it's moving at warp speed. How would you describe the culture that you've built?
Yeah, I think it's the same. Mission driven, but I think the core values that we have are a lot around urgency and ownership, right? Like, I think a lot about what the default timeline of a company is, right? Like, okay, someone says, okay, we need to do that, like whatever it is, this project. Is the default timeline, let's get it done by next week, next month, or tomorrow, right? And like,
But the default timeline in Delhi is always ho jayega. But
yeah.
Got it. So.
But like aggressively pushing people to like condense the default timeline. And my number one fear is that default timeline slipping, because I think it's hard to bring it back. Because the thing is, like actions beget information, right? Or unlock the ability to do further actions, right? So you like every action you take either allows you to like compound whatever that is, or unlock some information which you use to pivot your next action, right?
Wonderful. Great lesson to call out. Often in our business, we talk about shipping velocity, doing things, hustle, run fast. I think you have given a great framework around it. that those actions beget information that you can use to further improve the next action.
Yes.
And that's one great way for doing it. Let's take the last question. It's about founder conviction versus market readiness by Kosh Semwal. It says, in a capital disciplined ecosystem, which you're not in, but we'll come to that, how should founders balance strong personal conviction with real market signals, especially when early traction is still ambiguous? So, amongst your competitive set, you are actually more capital constrained. Yet you are succeeding, and like I said earlier, congratulations on your latest round. How do you get the conviction that more money is just not going to win necessarily?
Yeah. So in the early stage, I will say that I think early stage is inherently not rational, right? Like very, very early stage. As you would know, I mean, you guys.
I mean, we didn't invest, so clearly it's not rational.
Yeah. I think it's like you have to have, like, early traction actually means nothing. It makes me laugh a lot when early stage founders, or early stage investors, I talk to them and they talk about a company and they're like, yeah, I really like how they do this. Or like their metric is like whatever, these metrics or whatever. And I'm like, this is a joke, because as you scale, like that like cute thing that they do, they'll realize is like really stupid and like doesn't work or doesn't scale.
And it's probably gamified.
Yeah, and so I think everything comes down to belief, right? Like if you have to have the conviction, and I think the role of an early stage investor is to back people who have the conviction, who you think are going to be able to build it, right? And so I don't think traction means much.
Belief is good, but what about real market signals? Forget traction. Because I know that your conviction is not necessarily inside out. How do you seek validation of your conviction?
So I think that's just talking to customers, talking to professionals, right? And it's ultimately those things, right?
It's your demand side and your supply side.
And I think your job as an early stage founder is to like absorb as much information as possible and then act on that information. And you only get information from doing things and then talking to the end stakeholders, your customers, your professionals, and then iterating as fast as possible, right? And that's your only job as an early stage founder.
How many, whatever you can share publicly, how many transactions or something, what is the metric of a business today?
So we are doing over 26,000 bookings a day now.
So now you have effectively 26,000 customers a day. How do you retain that customer backwards view at this scale, personally as a founder? What do you do?
I think it all boils down to continuing to talk to customers, right?
Do you do that every day?
So we have people who do that. I just like read a lot of the written feedback that we get.
Got it.
And then talk to customers when I have time. Like not every day, but on a regular basis. I think there's also like a voice of customer function which has to be built over time. And like I read every single like social media post about Pronto, by the way. So I think.
Can't you use AI now to get you some of these signals more real time?
I mean, AI helps because you can essentially condense a lot of information very quickly, right? Yeah. But I think the point is, as you scale, it's like continuing to also monitor the things that the customer cares about, right? So if you know, okay, the customer cares about like these.
Give me examples of what's changed after the initial product market fit is clear, how you reach that. But something that's changed for you over the last 2-3 months, just listening to the customers.
So this is an interesting question. So there's a couple things. One is that you realize that as you scale, there's a lot more like black holes or like blind spots that appear and in your operations. And you only find out about this when you're like talking to customers. So certain things that are not happening the way they should, you'll actually only ever find out by talking to a customer and hearing their experience. Like for example, we had a professional who just like tricked the customer into giving them the start OTP and then entered it. And I don't think we ever would have found that out unless we had like spoken to that customer, right? And then we're like, okay, like we should geofence where they can enter the start OTP, right? Like,
I mean, when all these cab services came, the amount of this collusion or fraud or whatever.
Yeah. So fraud is one thing, and then also like thinking about quality, right? Quality is something that is like things like on-time fulfillment. We have like a metric, right? Like we can see it on a dashboard. It's like mathematically based on like when the start OTP was entered based on the scheduled time. Things like quality, you can do a lot of like monitoring based on ratings and audits, but ultimately if you're thinking on a micro market by micro market basis, which quality exists on, like essentially like quality can differ, in every micro market. You have to do a lot of talking to customers to make sure that you're consistent.
Yeah, superb. Anjali, very inspiring story. Very happy to see someone like you come back to India and create impact. There are people watching both from a age perspective, gender perspective, sitting in the US, thinking of coming back. What advice do you want to share?
This is a good question. I think if you're afraid to do something, like just like the only way that you'll be able to like resolve those fears is just by doing it, right? Like you'll never be fully prepared to do anything, right? If you're waiting for the right time to start the company, if you're waiting for the right time to make the move, there'll never be a right time. There's always something that's going to come up, and there's always be some amount of fear, and so you just have to rip the Band-Aid off and do it.
And I think the big learning is that you have been doing that throughout your life, and that's how you felt prepared for this, whether it was in the examples like hiking that you gave, where you pushed yourself beyond your comfort zone.
Yes.
Superb. Congratulations on all the progress, and
Thank
thank you
you.
for being here.
Thank you.
All right.
You're watching Z47 Moments, the podcast by India's oldest venture capital firm, Z47. If you like this episode, consider hitting the subscribe button and the bell icon so you never miss an update from Z47 Moments.